Hi, I'm Fred Koury, CEO of Smart Business Network, and welcome to SmartTalk. My guest today is the co-CEO of the Riverside Company, a $13 billion private equity firm that has invested in over 800 companies. Stewart, welcome to SmartTalk.
Thanks, Fred. Pleasure to be with you.
Glad to have you here. Stewart, let's jump right in. The first question I have for you is, can you please tell us your first experience in business?
Sure, Fred. And I started life early. I discovered early on that it was fun to have money in my pocket. So whether it was shoveling snow or mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, being a short order cook, and I was well under 5 feet at the time, those were all great experiences. But one that I really think about a lot is when I was at Oberlin College, I realized that there was a tremendous need for students to get their possessions hauled back and forth between the New York area where I lived and Ohio, where Oberlin is. And I started something that ultimately was called Stew Haul. And it was, I would rent a U-Haul truck and I would haul people's possessions, bikes, records, clothes, back and forth at the start and end of each semester. I ended up making more money doing that than I made in my summer jobs. And what I realized is it's really the brilliance of capitalism. Find a need, meet it. And at Riverside, we're very fond of finding businesses that exploit, in the best sense of a word, a niche. We're fond of saying if you have a niche, scratch it. And that was my first experience doing that.
What a great idea. Stuart, what kind of impact has that had on the rest of your career?
I always have loved business, the game of business. The people talk about, differentiating their personal life or their business life. My experience, Fred, is there's not much in life that's more personal than business. The relationships, the friendships that I've built, the things I've learned in business, but also that sense of accomplishment. The money in the pocket, whether it was the couple of dollars I got for shoveling somebody's sidewalk, or now we get a little more than a couple of bucks when we successfully buy and sell a company. But it's still that same feeling of satisfaction that it brings.
That's great. Stuart, why do you feel you've been so successful?
Well, we can quibble with so successful, but I'm going to start at the highest level, which applies to me, and I think applies to maybe you and maybe many of your listeners, which is luck. I've had tremendous luck. It starts with being born in the right country at the right time, to the right parents, having the right friends and the right schooling. But I'm very fond of the expression, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I think without hard work, luck, it doesn't often present itself. And I think that's key. And then finally, I'll just say, I've learned along the way from some mentors that relationships really matter. And when I think about my career path, when I think about Riverside's path, if you will, it's driven by relationships. And I would simply say to folks, pay attention to them.
I'm glad you mentioned mentors. Often we don't get to the top by ourselves. Is there a particular mentor that stands out in your mind that really had an impact on you?
Oh boy, there's many, obviously, and it's hard to narrow the list down too much. I mentioned my parents and things, but there's a guy named Harvey Siegelbaum. Maybe he'll have a chance to listen to this, and he's somebody I met well over 40 years ago. And we've been very close since then. He had a remarkable career in healthcare and insurance. And when he retired, he's not the retiring type. He became an advisor to Riverside. He's officed in our New York offices. We talk every week, if not every day. He has been a tremendous source of advice and guidance. I would certainly cite him. But what I love about mentorship is you can have many mentors in many different areas, and I've been blessed with that.
You can.
My co-CEO, Bela Sigathy, is for sure a mentor.
That's great. Stewart, obviously you've had many accomplishments. I was wondering if there's one in particular that stands out to you that you'd like to talk about.
Um, Obviously, I'm in many ways Riverside is my life's work. I'm not an artist. This is my canvas. I'm not a musician. This is my score. But I'm going to mention, Fred, and I know you're familiar with it, the work that I've had the privilege of doing with a village to create something called Velosano, which is a bike ride that raises money for cancer research at the Cleveland Clinic. And many of us have been touched by cancer. That's the euphemism we use. Nobody gets touched, you get clobbered by it. For me, it's been too many friends and family, and including my brother who died from glioblastoma 2 years ago. And Velosano is a very personal cause. We've raised $30 million over the first 9 years of Velosano. That money is all used for what I would describe as sort of venture capital-like high-risk research into cures. That money gets matched in many cases by federal money. So that's led to about $60 million of research. The research is done overwhelmingly right here in Cleveland, Ohio, or in some cases a clinic's facility in Florida. So it's our friends and neighbors doing that work. And it's a source of extraordinary pride for me.
Thank you, Stewart, for all the hard work you've done with Velosano. I know that it's not easy, and obviously it shows in the results. Over $30 million. That's fantastic.
Again, it's a village. There's a large group of us who have worked on it.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Stewart, as we talk about some of our accomplishments, one of the questions I like to ask people are, we've made mistakes along the way as well. Is there a particular one that stands out in your mind that you'd like to share with us and kind of what you learned from it?
Sure. Yeah. How much time do you have? So, in our world, typically a mistake is defined as a deal where we don't get back all of our money, let alone a positive return on it. It happens, fortunately, not too often, but all of those are painful mistakes. But the interesting thing about those is no matter how hard we try, and sometimes we try really hard, we can't lose more than all of our money in a deal. But when we get a deal right, we can make 3 times, 5 times, we've made 40 times our money on a deal. So the biggest mistake I would point to was an opportunity we had relatively early in the history of Riverside to buy a little company that many of your viewers may have heard of called Burt's Bees. And we met the owner, the founder of that company, and very creative woman. And we talked to her a lot about how we could work together to help grow the business, but ultimately we didn't step to the plate the way we should have, and somebody else did, and the company started to take off. We had another swing at that pitch later when she came back to market, now looking for a much higher valuation, and we again didn't stretch to it, and somebody else did. Anyway, long story short, ultimately that company grew and grew and grew, and eventually, it's publicly reported, so I don't mind mentioning it. Clorox bought it for about $900 million. So that's a pretty big mistake.
It's fantastic. That's a big number.
Yeah,
a big number, 900 million.
Yeah. Well, we've built up, and sold multiple companies for over $1 billion. And as you know, we tend to start with businesses valued for, as in many cases, under $100 million. So it's when you buy the right company in the right industry with the right leadership, the sky's the limit.
Now, the next question I'm going to ask you is maybe tough for you to answer, but I know that you're a very hard worker and that you've been very successful. Have you ever had an aha moment where maybe you're spending a little bit too much time on work, maybe not enough time on the personal front?
Yeah, I mean, I people talk about work-life balance, and I don't think that's something I've always gotten right. I don't think, Fred, I've always gotten my priorities right. I've missed some life events, some important events, because if you're, I talked about the game of business, and if you're on the field and nobody's blown a whistle and the play is still running, it's kind of sometimes hard you feel like you're running to the sideline, and it's hard for me to do that. even though, particularly as Riverside has grown now with 350 people spread around the world at Riverside, I don't need to be on the field every day for us to win games. A lot of other people who are better than me at their positions. But work-life balance is a work in progress for me. I would give myself relatively low grades here, and I've watched some of my colleagues who get it right, and I see the fulfillment it brings them. I'm late in my life now, starting to pay more attention to family, more attention to religion, and some other things, and trying to bring about a little better balance.
That's good. That's good to hear. What keeps you up at night, Stewart?
Wow. Well, first of all, I can pretty much sleep anytime, anywhere. So it's not literally keeping me awake, Fred. I'm very fortunate. I don't sleep enough, but I have no problem. For the time I allocate, I have no problem sleeping all of it. But if the point of the question is, what am I worrying about? There's so much to worry about. We are investors in over 100 companies. We have invested in well over 800 companies. And every time you do that, you're taking on a lot of responsibility. These companies matter. They matter to the employees. They matter to their communities, their vendors, their customers. And we take that responsibility really seriously. And kind of like doctors in the Hippocratic Oath, the first do no harm. And sometimes I mention the companies don't work, the deals don't work. And I'm proud of the fact that even when we've lost money on a deal, in most cases, almost all cases, the company's gone on and the jobs have remained, and there's a chance for them still to be a contributor in their community. But that's a big responsibility. I can well remember the feeling in 2008 when the world was ending, or so it seemed. Financial markets were crashing, Lehman, Bear Stearns, you name it. We owned 69 little businesses at the time spread around the world. They employed close to 20,000 people. We had a couple hundred Riversiders. And there were some months there when, you really said to yourself, are we ever going to do another deal? Are we ever going to be able to borrow another dollar? Is every company we own going to end up in distress? And that was pretty scary. I had similar feelings in March and April of 2020 when the pandemic struck. I had never contemplated that we would have a time when you would put the entire world's economy into a coma, in self-induced coma. That's almost unimaginable. So that was pretty worrisome. And we always think about stress tests, but we never came up with a stress test. Let's see what would happen if we had a war, a recession, inflation, and a pandemic all at the same time, which we're having right now. Meanwhile, arguably, 2021 was one of the best years in the history of Riverside, and I think many private equity firms. 2022 remains to be seen what will happen, but so far our companies are performing like champs. So, but these things are all they weigh on you. They're great. They're great responsibilities, and of course, I didn't even talk about in many ways the greatest responsibility, which is investors trust us with their money. And look, it's not widows and orphans. Nobody's ever invested in Riverside where if they lost that money, they would be homeless or hungry, God forbid. But people entrust us, and I don't mind losing my own money, but losing somebody else's money weighs really heavily on you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. I know that there's a lot of things that have to weigh heavily on you. Now, as I'm sitting here thinking about what motivates a guy like Stewart Kohl, he's got so many different things. Professionally, is it to try to get another $1 billion in assets? Is it to buy another 20 companies? Is it to make X more dollars? What motivates someone like you?
Yeah. Well, I did talk about the fun of the game. I really enjoy the game of business. I hope you don't view that as cavalier or I take it very seriously, but it is, again, I'm not the most creative person in other arenas. So this is one. Also, you may be shocked to learn this, Fred, but growing up, I was neither the tallest nor the strongest nor the fastest. My athletic prowess is pretty much limited to riding a bicycle. So here's an arena in which I can excel, and I am competitive, and I do like to win. I really love win-wins. I really love wins. I love it when everybody wins, and by the way, that can happen much more often than we think it can. But I do like winning, and this is my arena. This is I don't play touch football, and I'm not a master swimmer, but here's a place I can compete and win. But also it's and I mentioned my co-CEO Bela, and I think this would be true of our entire cabinet, our leadership team at Riverside. It's really fun to watch Riverside grow and create for the next generation of Riversiders the same opportunities we had, 34 years ago when we started, or 25 years ago, or 15 years ago. I find that incredibly rewarding. And then finally, when one of our deals works, it's the beauty of private equity is the alignment. So our investors make money, Riverside makes money, the CEO of the company makes money, the C-suite makes money, and we, in many cases, push that down through the organization. And that's incredibly rewarding. I still to this day look at the spreadsheet for every deal we do when we exit to see where all the proceeds went. And sometimes it's very large numbers, sometimes it's just nice numbers, but you really think about what that means. It's paying off a mortgage, it's buying a second home, it's sending a kid to college. It's changing. I received a letter literally the other day from one of our investors who said that their investment in Riverside had changed their life. That we had a very successful fund, and it created the ability for him to transition his family business to his daughters in advance of when he would have otherwise been able to do that. And we're going to have lunch next week and celebrate. And I mean, that's incredibly rewarding. We've had an important investor like the Howard Hughes Medical Institute write us and share with us that Nobel Prize that they had won, and how, not specific to Riverside, but all the firms they invest in had helped them create the gains that had funded that research. So it's an incredibly rewarding part of our job.
Now, the next question may be a little bit harder to answer. What motivates you personally?
I still have something to prove. I'm still have, again, this is my arena, my opportunity to prove. And Riverside is my strongest proof statement. My family is certainly a powerful driver for proof. And I'm very active in philanthropy because I think it's a responsibility that those of us who have been blessed with so much have. It's a privilege to be able to give to causes that are important. I'm a huge proponent of giving while you're still alive, because odds are when you die, that money's going to go anyway. So why not get the real pleasure of seeing the difference it makes? And that could be to a religious organization, that can be to a healthcare organization, or to a school, or a cultural and arts organization. But in each case, seeing the benefit of that in real time is also it's been a real goal of mine.
Stewart, I have one final question for you. How would you define the difference between success and significance?
Wow.
You can take a minute to think about it if you'd like.
Great. It's a great question. I think it's something we all ought to be thinking about. And I would say that, so the cavalier answer might be to say that significance are the things people are going to talk about at your funeral and are going to write about in your obituary. But they're going to write about success too. I mean, both of those things get covered. But I think significance is going to be measured by the impact you've had on the life of others. So whether that's the work that I talked about, the results of which can change people's careers and lives, whether that's philanthropy, which I talked about, the ability to change people's lives. It also dovetails nicely with my friend Mark Shapiro, I think you know, and his definition of leadership, which is that anybody can be a leader, because the definition of leadership is somebody who makes everyone around them better. And I think significance is when you look back on your life and you look at the people around you and you say, how did I help make them better?
Stewart, thank you for being on Smart Talk today and sharing some life lessons. Is there any last word you'd like to share?
I just want to say thank you, Fred, because you are changing the world in your way, on whether it's on the printed page or increasingly in the digital world. I've enjoyed being a part of that as well, and you're doing great work here.
Thank you, Stewart.